Well, a very good morning to you and a very happy new month. Welcome to Decision 2022. And of course, we have just entered the campaign home stretch before Kenyans line up to elect their leaders in exactly 1 week's time.
Good morning indeed. Yes, and the Electoral Commission is this week also entering a crucial moment in its calendar as it starts the deployment of poll officials and ballot materials ahead of next week's polls.
Well, indeed, we shall be giving you an extensive and comprehensive coverage of the 2022 election every day, every single moment until the dust settles.
And we promise you nothing but the best of coverage analysis. Let's begin with some of the news at this hour.
Indeed, I'm Zainab Ismail.
And I'm James Smart.
Indeed, James. All right. So on our first story this hour, President Uhuru Kenyatta and his deputy William Ruto continue to wrangle about the 2022 succession politics, and the head of state today, that is yesterday, reacted to remarks made by the deputy president, saying he has no intention of killing his deputy or his allies.
While speaking during the commissioning of the Nairobi Expressway, President Kenyatta said Ruto and associates have insulted him for over 3 years while he stayed silent.
Naoma Sampao has that report.
Just 8 days to the end of the Jubilee administration and the war of words between the two principals that established the coalition to form the government seems to be in an all-time high, with each using their turn on the microphone to throw jibes at each other. President Uhuru Kenyatta, while commissioning the Nairobi Expressway today, he touted his deputy for his recent remarks and that of his allies that the president was issuing threats behind camera lenses. Uhuru, however, rubbished the claims.
Nikikujibu kwa sababu umesema mambo ya uongo, kuna haja ya kuambia watu nataka kuua. Si mumenitusi karibu miaka 3, kuna mtu amewaguza. Hiyo miaka 3 nimekuwa kwa kiti. Si nilikuwa na uwezo. Sasa wakati naenda kupatiana serikali na sina uwezo, ndio niko na time ya kukutafuta. Piga story yako, uza sera zako, wachana na mimi. Mimi nafanya kazi yangu, nimalize. Nyinyi muende muombe kura. Wananchi wakiwapatia sawa, wakiwanyima, twende nyumbani pamoja. Shida iko wapi? Si dunia itaendelea. Yeah.
On Friday, while campaigning in Nandi County, Ruto scoffed at President Uhuru Kenyatta, accusing him of using state agencies to curtail his presidential bid, as well as threatening him and his allies. The fury exchanges coming after President Uhuru Kenyatta allegedly held a meeting with leaders from the Rift Valley in Nakuru, where he swore to deal with his deputy.
Unataka kutuletea furugu kwa uchaguzi. Wewe umeanza mikutano ya usiku, unataka kufuruga matokeo ya uchaguzi. Bwana Rais, tafadhali, hata kama projekti yako amekwama, hauwezi kutulazimisha kwa projekti yako, na hauwezi kuharibu nchi kwa sababu projekti yako imekwama.
It's horrible.
Uhuru's cousin, who is also the patron of the National Council of Elders, Kungu Muigai, has however warned both the president and his deputy against the continued war of words, saying it could plunge the country into a crisis.
Although the president is my brother, he is in the wrong. In Kikuyu we have a saying, big brother, do good so you can show you are a true brother. If you keep hurling insults at your small brother, he will hurl them back at you. And it will hurt more because you are older.
President Uhuru Kenyatta has urged Kenyans to exercise their constitutional mandate and vote on the 9th of August and ensure peace prevails.
I want to urge all of us to maintain peace during the remaining campaign period and on and after the date of the election. Kuna haja ya matusi jameni. Kila mtu, including myself, ako na uhuru wa kupigia debe yoyote ambaye anataka.
Naoma Sampao, NTV.
Well, now Azimio One Kenya presidential candidate Raila Odinga is assuring his supporters in the Rift Valley of their safety just 8 days before the elections and urging them to dismiss any threats if they vote differently.
Well, according to Raila, every Kenyan living on Kenyan soil has the freedom to make their own decisions free of fear. NTV's senior political affairs reporter Kennedy Murithi is back on the campaign trail and brings us the events in the Azimio One Kenya rallies in Nandi Hills and Eldoret.
The August 9 election campaigns are in the home stretch, with only 8 days till the big day, and key political players are not taking any chances. The Azimio One Kenya coalition presidential candidate Raila Odinga pitching tent in Deputy President William Ruto's political backyard, that is Rift Valley, on Sunday, seeking to persuade residents to support his bid and solidify his support base. But Raila is expressing concerns that there is a deliberate attempt to prevent his supporters from voting.
Eldoret ni Kenya, na kila Mkenya akuna haki ya kuja na kuishi hapa Eldoret, na kusema na kufanya chochote bila anavyotaka, bila kutisha na mtu yoyote.
Sisi Azimio ni watu ya kupenda amani. Tunataka Wakenya waishi pamoja kwa amani. Tunataka Wakenya watengamane. Kila mtu aishi popote. Vile mimi naishi huko Migori, nimechaguliwa huko Migori.
Hata kama vikaratasi wanaweza kutisha watu. Hapa na Kenya kwingine ni sawa. Uwe uko Kakamega, uwe uko hapa, uwe uko Kisumu, uwe uko Nakuru, Mombasa, Kilifi, Malindi, kila pahali Kenya ni yetu sisi sote. Watu wanajua kiti imeenda. Sasa makasiriko imeingia. Uongo umeingia. Hata udaku umeingia.
Na ndugu zetu hapa ni kwenu. Some of you are third generation, fourth generation, nyumbani ndio hapa. Msitishwe, mnatishwe na nani?
According to Raila, his supporters should walk head high and know President Uhuru Kenyatta and his security apparatus are still in charge and will protect them.
The right to vote is enshrined in our constitution, and no Kenyan should feel threatened that if he votes this way or that way, he's going to be evicted from where he lives. That will not happen. Kutoka siku ya leo mpaka tarehe 9 mpaka siku ile ya kubeba Biblia, Uhuru Kenyatta yuko in charge.
Consequently, Raila has also criticized his opponents in Kenya Kwanza, saying they are unfit to occupy any office since their morals are questionable.
The candidate, Mr. Ruto, should disqualify his running mate, Mr. Gachiesa. We are running against convicted thieves.
Mimi nakuomba naibu wa rais, ile ofisi Mungu atanipea next week. Mimi namuomba, kama unahofia maisha ya yeyote kwa nyumba yako, tafadhali wapatie askari wa kutosha, na kama hawatoshi, wewe bado ni umeajiriwa na serikali ya Kenya, uliza uongezewe.
Vile Gachagua anaongelesha rais, ajue ukiona chama chako cha Chadema, si ndio? Kama Gachagua anakosea rais ambaye yuko hapa saa hii heshima, na yeye akiingia kwa kiti anaweza pata heshima.
Kama unaona mtu anakula damu tatu, anakunywa damu tatu peke yake, hata ana huruma na watoto wa Marakwet, anakula damu ya Nakuru, hana huruma na akina mama wa huko, wewe unafikiria atakuwa na huruma kwako kwa watoto gani?
The next 1 week will be crucial for the Azimio One Kenya team as they now send their leaders to the different places they come from in an effort to mobilize their supporters to come out in large numbers to vote for them on the August 9th election. Kennedy Murithi, NTV in Eldoret, Uasin Gishu County.
All right, and as the political campaigns enters the home stretch, like we said, the Kenya Kwanza Alliance is waging pitched campaigns in the charged presidential race between UDA presidential candidate William Ruto and Azimio la Umoja presidential candidate Raila Odinga.
Well, the Kenya Kwanza Brigade, while touring Western Kenya and North Rift counties, condemned the National Cohesion and Integration Commission's proposal to suspend some social media platforms as political temperatures fuel hate speech, calling it a backward approach to the problem.
While Ruto and his supporters staged their meeting outside Bukhungu Stadium after being denied a permit to hold their rally there. And TV's Melita Oletenges reports from the campaign trail.
Kenya Kwanza and Azimio la Umoja campaigns are in the home stretch after 2 months of tailgating. In his last visit to Western Kenya before the formal campaign period ends on August 6th, Ruto and his allies blasted NCIC for proposing close monitoring of social media platforms to curb hate speech remarks, while accusing Azimio la Umoja presidential candidate Raila Odinga of meddling with the electoral body.
Propose kwamba siku ya kura wafunge Facebook, wafunge Twitter, wafunge mitandao. I want to tell you, Reverend Kobia, wewe ni bishop, wewe ni reverend, wewe ni mtu ya dini, wachana na siasa ichezwe na wanasiasa.
Pia kitendawili ameanza kuleta ile mambo yake. Amesema ako na shida na IBC. Mara ako na shida na Chebukati. Mara ako na shida na register. Juzi amesema sijui ako na shida na form gani. Mumeona huyu mtu akishaona kura haitoshi, anaanza ile maneno yake ukora.
After bringing Ford Kenya party leader Moses Wetangula and ANC party leader Musalia Mudavadi to his fold, political commentators say Deputy President William Ruto's ventures have shifted the political dynamics in Western Kenya, a region with more than 2 million voters who voted for Raila Odinga in the past elections. The Kenya Kwanza camp wants regional voters.
Hatutaki mchezo hapa Vihiga. Mimi sitaki kumdanganya. Tunataka tufurute kabisa ili tufikishe idadi ya kura ambaye wale jamaa hawawezi kukimbia kotini.
Tumeungana na Omwami Musalia Mudavadi na Omwami Moses Wetangula na Wakenya wengine wengi. So mnajua last time huyo kitendawili alipata kura hapa. Mimi naona yote iko kwa William Ruto.
In Kakamega County, Kenya Kwanza Alliance was denied a permit to convene at Bukhungu Stadium. Benjamin Washiali, MP for Mumias East, was ejected from the stadium he was inspecting before today's rally. Ruto toured Nandi, Trans Nzoia, Vihiga and Kakamega counties and is expected to rally support one last time from voters in his political backyard of Uasin Gishu County and Baringo County. Recent opinion polls by Tifa Research indicate that Raila Odinga is in the lead in Western Kenya with 59% popularity. William Ruto comes in second with 27% popularity. After waging his last charm offensive in Western Kenya, Ruto is banking on his camaraderie with ANC party leader Musalia Mudavadi and Ford Kenya party leader Moses Wetangula in bagging the majority of votes in Western Kenya. Melita Oletenges, NTV in Hamisi, Vihiga County.
Well, the Kenya Conference of Catholic Bishops have called for leaders seeking elective posts to shun the verbal dress drawn from the characterized their campaigns in the recent days, urging them to respect one another.
Well, the bishops further tasked the IBC to do everything possible to address legitimate concerns over the recent events involving alleged claims of possible interference of the vote count process. Our reporter Margaret Kimathi has that story.
As the 2022 general election draws near, the Kenya Conference of Catholic Bishops has called on leaders seeking elective posts to desist from making pronouncements and utterances that can provoke anxiety among Kenyans and lead to violence. In a statement issued by Nyeri Diocese Archbishop Anthony Muheria, the bishops urged Kenyans to exercise their democratic right by coming out and voting on August 9th, noting that failure to do so would give room for less qualified candidates, including the corrupt leaders, and take leadership positions.
It is our individual and collective civic duty to safeguard and promote peace before, during, and after voting and even after election results are announced. To vote is to develop our country. Not only are we encouraging each eligible voter to go out to vote, but also vote wisely.
Muheria further implored the IEBC to address legitimate concerns over claims of possible interferences of the vote counting process.
The IEBC has to do whatever is in its power to address legitimate concerns, knowing that its civic duty is to promote and protect the interests of voters. It ought to come out openly to clarify any allegations or misrepresentations. We are urging them to explain in detail to all Kenyans the entire process.
Meanwhile, Nation Media Group Chairman Wilfred Kiboro has called for peaceful elections, urging leaders to prepare their supporters for any outcome of the election.
As Kenyans, we really need to say no to this kind of toxic politics and divisive politics that make us go for each other's throats every 5 years. I think we've got to do away with this. Therefore, for me, I would like to urge you, fellow Kenyans, that peace begins with each one of us here. If we purpose to keep peace, there will be peace.
I want to assure you from the NMG fraternity, NMG family, we will deliver to you a free and fair and balanced coverage of the elections. We want to encourage you to interact with our various publications, with our newspapers, with our television, with our radio, as we bring to you the latest and the most balanced and accurate coverage of this election.
The political class was cautioned against making public remarks that may antagonize the efforts to deliver free, fair and credible elections. Margaret Kimathi, NTV.
All right, just away from politics, the head of a woman whose mutilated body was found in Barut area of Nakuru County has been found nearly 3 weeks after her death.
And the body of Eunice Kasindu Khatanje was found dumped by the roadside a few kilometers from where another body belonging to a man was also found.
The two are believed to have been killed by unknown persons, as Ruth Sarmoi tells us.
The remains of Eunice Kasindu Khatanje were retrieved nearly 15 feet down this pit latrine after suspects behind her brutal murder led investigators to these rental houses in Kapkures area in Nakuru West.
Tumefaulu kupata kichwa cha msichana ambaye alikatwa shingo kwa upanga kulingana uchunguzi wetu baada ya manajisi ya kidhumla.
The 20-year-old girl was killed on 12th July and her body dumped in Barut, 4 kilometers away from where her parts were recovered.
We believe that this kind of an act could not have been conducted by one person or two people or three. This must have been a group of people because it's not easy. The other line of thinking that we also pursuing is the motive behind these murders. We have some grouping rivalry between Ronda, Baruti, Kivumbini and all that. And there has been a spirit of issues like revenge, wars amongst themselves.
Since the gruesome murders, 3 suspects are already in police custody as investigations into her death continue. Eunice's mother says her daughter left their home in Butere, Kakamega County in July this year, indicating that she had found a job opportunity as a house manager in Nakuru town. His cousin, who was in close contact with Eunice during her stay in Nakuru's Ronda area, says she lived in a troubled relationship during the 2 years she was in Nakuru, and after her disappearance, efforts to speak to her boyfriend about her whereabouts were unsuccessful.
Nikachukua namba ya huyo kijana, nikampigia simu kumuuliza Eunice mwenye ulikuwa unaonekana naye ako wapi? Akasema huyo mtu mimi si yuko naye na sikuangi naye, na akakata simu hivyo na akaniweka blacklist, hakuwahi patikana tena.
As Eunice's remains are set to undergo DNA analysis before burial, this family has now been left with the burden of transporting their kin's remains to their home in Kakamega.
Watu wa serikali tafadhali, mimi sina mbele wala nyuma. Mnisaidie venye naweza peleka mtoto.
mwili wake nyumbani.
Ruth Sarmui, NTV, Nakuru.
Well, the government expects heavy returns from the Nairobi Expressway as usage of the highway went exceed expectations during the public trial period that began in the month of April 2022 and ended on the 30th of July.
Well, President Uhuru Kenyatta, during the launch on Sunday, lauded the government and other stakeholders involved in the execution of the project. Here's more.
President Uhuru Kenyatta on Sunday commissioned the Nairobi Expressway 3 months after a successful public trial. Also known as Jomo Kenyatta International Airport Westlands Highway, the expressway is a toll road connecting the airport to the neighborhood of Rironi in Kiambu County along the Nairobi-Limuru Road. Transport CS James Macharia commended the president for the speedy construction, saying that he was the main push behind the success of the completion of the road. The highway has proven to take a motorist an average of 15 to 24 minutes drive from Lolongo to Kiambu Road that would sometimes see motorists in traffic snarl-ups for up to 3 hours. On his part, the president lauded all stakeholders involved in the execution of the first public-private partnership road project in Kenya that marks the government's pivot towards leveraging the private capital to bridge Kenya's infrastructure deficit.
Indeed, it is amazing that during this trial period that has just come to an end, we have exceeded the number of vehicles that were expected by a higher margin, meaning that the returns from this project may be even achieved much sooner than had previously been projected, and for that I congratulate our partners wherever they are. I don't know where they went.
Other initiatives taken to reduce congestion in Nairobi include the construction of the 97 kilometers long ring of 4 bypasses, the eastern, southern, northern and western bypass, as well as the expansion of Ngong Road and Outer Ring Road and the construction of several ring roads in the city. Nina Shaban, NTV.
All right, thanks Nina for that report. Well, time for our newspaper review this morning, and we'll be taking a look at some of those headlines in the dailies. Later on, of course, we'll be joined by our panelists to review some of the political statements made over the past weekend and, of course, past week as we head to the election, which is just on Tuesday, by the way. Can you imagine that?
Absolutely. A few days into this.
Right.
This week is the home stretch.
Right.
The campaigns end on the 6th. So we expect a lot of those sort of last political talking points before we head into the before we have the two days of sort of breather.
Right.
Before we go to the polls
So
on Tuesday next week.
Yeah, very interesting. So on the Daily Nation, on the front page of the Daily Nation, let me just put it in front. I hope we can see that. So the shape of Mount Kenya, how Ruto wrenched the mountain away from an unsuspecting Uhuru, and why Raila presents an ever-present danger. That's on page 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6 of the Daily Nation. I mean, it's interesting that this has come out, and of course they have Daily Nation have covered this quite extensively, and the Mount Kenya region presents quite a challenge for both presidential contenders, I believe.
Absolutely. So the analysis is about the vote-rich Mount Kenya region. The story there, special reporting done by Mutumu Matthew, John Kamau, and Alex Ndegwa has been in the works for a long time. The question is what will happen to the Mount Kenyan voters this time, given that the Mount Kenyan voters do not have a presidential candidate. So this is an interesting question, and you have that coverage in about 6 pages.
Right, indeed. And I think it's interesting. You know, Mutumu Matthew has given a very interesting analysis of how President Uhuru Kenyatta came to power, you know, on the backs of the 2013 campaign. Remember using the Muthamaki term, You know, Uhuru Kenyatta was considered a savior, you know, and he came into power. So how that has sort of slipped through his hand, and of course the deputy president taking on, that leadership mantle in Mount Kenya is also very, very interesting. You can find that, of course, on page 2 and 3 of the Daily Nation, and that coverage still extends to page 4 and 5, and is in Mount Kenya as Uhuru term ends. And actually, this is actually the report I was telling you about by Alex Ndegwa. And of course, he's standing, he says, down the escarpment towards Muranga to the coffee plantations in Nyeri, the rice fields of Kirinyaga and further afield to the rocky drylands of Laikipia, Mount Kenya is restless and the king's crown is on the line.
Absolutely. That story also moves forward to what John Kamau eventually talks about, the Karua and the Gachagua, you know, being the top sort of political elites in Mount Kenya right now. So for the first time since the advent of multipartyism, Mount Kenya doesn't have a strong presidential candidate. That's sort of like a historical perspective on what is happening in the mountain. And you saw that during the deputy presidential debate, the question on the leadership of Mount Kenya, where does it rest? Does it rest on Gachagua or Karua? That question will be answered in full.
Indeed.
In about a week's time.
7 days, should we say 7?
Yeah, about 7 days.
7 days.
Right.
So that's very interesting. All right, well, a little away from that, we have on the 8th page of the Daily Nation, we will take you to court, Munya tells millers as he alleges hoarding. The Agriculture Cabinet Secretary Peter Munya has issued a stern warning to millers whom he accuses of hoarding maize flour. The Cabinet Secretary was speaking in Nandi Hills, and he said the government has started tracing those who are hoarding the maize flour, and from tomorrow, which is, tomorrow, many will be arrested and arraigned in court.
Well, currently, maize flour is not available in many shops and supermarkets, casting doubts on the efficiency of President Kenyatta's subsidy. That has been a story that's been going on for the last 2 months on the rising cost of living and the price of maize. And the question on what the millers has been asking is, what this subsidy, when does it kick in? When do they get their money? Because the subsidy does not solve the question and the problem of high cost of maize.
And of course, remember, President Kenyatta actually announced that it will use the 8 billion under a stimulus package to reduce the maize flour prices, of course, by up to a half. And that has featured also in a lot of most of the statements we've had. Cost of living has been quite a talking point in the campaigns. But also away from that, yesterday, the president commissioned the Nairobi Expressway and Eastern Bypass. That's the 70 billion shilling project. He says the project has not been financed through debt or government funds.
Right, so this is a 27.8 kilometers Nairobi Eastern Bypass that has been done. The expressway as well, the president saying that it's done better than expected. More vehicles are using it, and of course eases traffic, but most importantly opens up the country and the region for business, since you can access the airport and exit Nairobi.
Have you used it, by the way?
Yes, quite a frequent user of Nairobi Expressway. I think it's the comfort for me. I think it's just the fact that you just get on it and you get on the other side of town.
I mean, you've cut down on so much time you'd spend on traffic along Mombasa Road.
Right.
Yeah, so I think this is quite a huge relief for Kenyans, especially in Nairobi. All right, so on the 10th page of the Daily Nation, okay, so this has been also something interesting. I have no intentions of harming you, Uhuru tells Ruto. President Kenyatta telling Deputy President William Ruto that he has no intention of harming him, his family or allies. And of course, this coming after the Deputy President recently alleged that his family was in danger. And of course, the president was speaking yesterday during that commissioning of the Nairobi Expressway. And this is what he said: I want to urge Kenyans to maintain peace. There is no need to call each other names. Everybody, including myself, has the freedom to vote for their preferred candidate.
Yes, that back and forth between the president and his deputy, excuse me, reaching fever pitch. They have been going at each other for 3 or so years.
Right.
Shadow boxing.
But you know, we had the president sort of, back off. He was quite silent for, you know, a couple of months during the campaign period. But then at the very home stretch, and we're seeing the president coming up very strongly.
So absolutely, I think two things happen here. I think when the president, I think that's around end of last year, when the president finally showed his hand that he's supporting Raila Odinga and they formed the Azimio coalition, there was sort of like a back and forth between him and, you know, his deputy. In the essence, his deputy was talking about betrayal in that time. And in the polls that were conducted at that time showed that the Raila Odinga, you know, and Uhuru Kenyatta sort of camaraderie and that Azimio coalition wasn't working very well because their supporters both didn't understand what was happening. Why is the outgoing president supporting an opposition leader in essence, and in the back, you know, at the back of what was happening in the country, which was an economic meltdown. And in that sense, then I think the president did take a political sort of backseat to allow the candidate for Azimio coalition to go ahead and campaign for himself without the shadow of Uhuru Kenyatta on it. So in that sense, with this, I think the last 4 months that we saw less and less sort of attacks or conversion between the deputy and the president, because now Ruto had to focus on Raila, and Raila had to focus on Ruto. And so in that sense, then but it was going to happen. These are two individuals who, yes, they've been in coalition together, they know each other, they've been in business together.
I mean, there's so much history between these two
so it was going to
individuals.
And it's personal.
It
is really personal.
But it's unfortunate that it's playing out in the public. Well, then still on the 10th page of the Daily Nation, Rigathi should be disqualified over the 200 million case, says Raila Odinga. The Azimio One Kenya coalition now says UDA deputy presidential candidate Rigathi Gachagua should be disqualified over the 200 million graft case. The coalition has also rubbished Deputy President William Ruto's claim over his family's lives. The presidential candidate said that after the High Court ruled that Gachagua could not explain the source of his 200 million, he should be disqualified from the race. So speaking in Eldoret.
The clincher here is that Raila Odinga says we are running against convicted thieves. They cannot bring any change. They are insulting people from all corners. This is just sort of an interesting case, and Rigathi Gachagua had a chance last week to rebut this question, and he said that they were expecting this, that this case is obviously trumped up, and he says that in the fullness of time he'll appeal this case, and he will be, you know, be acquitted. That was his response. But obviously this was going to slip up into politics. And does it have implications? I suspect what it does, it gives the Azimio side just to contrast themselves that, you know, this is who we are, you know, people who have not been tainted. On the other side of the coalition, it points to what they've always said, that all these cases, all these corruption cases, why didn't they happen in the first, you know, 5 years of the Jubilee coalition? So these were obviously targeted. So they sort of play into the political what they want from the both political ends of the discussion.
All right, and just a quick one on still on the 10th page. IEBC says we're ready for the August elections. The Electoral Commission has said it is ready for the August 9th elections, assuring Kenyans it will deliver a free, fair and transparent election. Of course, this is after the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission launched the National Elections Call Center and the National Elections Media Center, which will serve as election information resource centers. And so interesting. I mean, IEBC has faced quite a lot of, I believe, challenges. Challenges
are a good word to say, right? I mean, I think organizing an election is a huge task, and I think we keep forget that it's not one election; it's 6 elections at once. 46,000 plus something polling stations. The amount of logistics that is needed is absolutely immense. The amount of workforce that is needed is incredibly a lot. And how to put all these things together, how this machine works, is never an easy work. And so the suspicion that comes with our elections, I think, is the fact that our elections are really, really securitized. You know, it's really about the security, because for some reason, there's people who always want to play, you know, the system. So that question and that problem, coupled with just how complex this thing is.
But then you also have, you know, the politicians, of course, trying to politicize the entire electoral process, and it's been quite a huge task for IEBC to have that balancing act, and then, of course, stand in its independence, you know, in managing the election. But then also,
and that's the thing.
So politicians.
So perhaps maybe we'll I think we're growing as a democracy, and maybe one of the things that, as we move forward, is to secure a more independent IEBC. In other jurisdiction, for instance, the electoral bodies are allowed to make laws that are not challenged in Parliament, you know, 2 years into an election. So a good time before an election, the electoral body that is charged with that responsibility essentially creates the playing field, and members of Parliament and politicians cannot have a say on it. So that way then you have these people who are in charge of this process, and if anything goes wrong, then you actually know who to appoint. At the moment, our election laws are part of politics, right? So we really can't run away from what IEBC has and what politicians want.
Interesting. All right, so just very quickly as we wind up on the Daily Nation, what follows, of course, what we were speaking about. Ruto accuses Uhuru of plot to disrupt elections, and he says the president is using chiefs to recruit youths to interrupt polls in his strongholds. That's on page 11. I don't know, Smart, if you have something to say about that, but what caught my eye on the 11th page of the Daily Nation, Wiper accusing Sonko of being a traitor for joining Kenya Kwanza. And so you have Mike Sonko pulling off a very interesting card at the very last moment, joining Kenya Kwanza, right?
Right, absolutely. The issue that I think this leaves Wiper with, sort of an egg on their face is because for the last month, none the less than the Wiper leader, Kalonzo Musyoka himself, has put himself front and center defending Mike Sonko and trying to get him on the ballot in Mombasa. Seen in court, and I think the last statement that he did was like, I will not rest until Mike Sonko is on the ballot in Mombasa. And then Mike
that
Sonko
didn't
does
work,
this, of course,
So Mike Sonko decides, all right.
Does the extreme. So it leaves, an egg on their face. But this is Mike Sonko being Mike Sonko.
So
there was absolutely nothing for him to lose.
All right. So, okay. So on the Standard, I think on the last page of the Daily Nation, it's all about the new power tariffs plans to give users control of bills. And on the front page of the Standard, numbers that show the huge task for IEBC. With 7 days to the elections, the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission has the critical duty to deliver a credible poll. The logistical enormity is unprecedented. Let me just give you the numbers quickly. 46,000, Standard says 233, but I think IEBC reviewed that to 46,229. The registered voters, 22.1 million. 700, that's the maximum voters per polling station. 16,100 candidates across the country, and the number of ballot papers printed, 65.2 million. 12 is the diaspora voting IEBC to take ballot papers to 12 foreign countries. And
just to stay on the numbers, there's 100,000 officials who will be at 290 constituency tallying centers. Other national tallying centers, which could push the numbers to more than 100,000 officers. Just talking about the enormity, if you like, of just the sheer numbers and the workforce that is needed, the logistics that is needed, the amount of interlinking connections that you need for that day. It's really, really immense. And I don't think we realize that until you're either part of the IEBC or on the election day, didn't realize how complex this machinery is.
And they're actually calling it a logistical nightmare for IEBC. Indeed, it actually is. Look, so we will still tell you what's still on the papers, and we'll continue to analyze some of the stories. I have to take a very quick break here on Decision 2022. When we come back, we'll be doing more of an in-depth analysis of course, some of the stories making headlines this hour. Stay with us. We'll be back.
get Sina Uhofu by Eric Smith, dial star 811 star 851 hash. Skiza, Nan Nation.
Everybody feel it, come around, we grind, we grind. Everybody feel it, come around, we grind, we grind. Everybody, 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 everybody. Oh yeah! Everybody in the front, front, front. Everybody in the front, front, front. Everybody in the front, front, front.
The music right here on Nation FM is on another level. We're playing the best hits, the biggest hits, right here on 96.3 Nation FM. My name is Antonio Soul. It's the Nation FM Drive every single weekday, Monday to Friday, from 3 p.m. to 7 p.m. The best hits, the best conversation, the best guests. It's all about entertainment, business, politics, and everything in between. Call me Sugar, because I keep it sugar and spice and all things nice.
Everybody, everybody, round.
Dhima ya uongozi ni kubwa mno.
Ni ule ambao nasema upuzi wa kisiasa.
Si gavana wangu, nilisema niliibiwa kura.
Kuna wale wanaoibeba barabara.
Nani angefikiri kwamba Uhuru wangeungana na Ruto?
Kuna watu huko mabroka huko nje makateli.
Lakini kuna wale ambao mzigo kwa hakika unawalemea kabisa.
Mimi ni mtu wa mtatu.
Kenya waulize maswali mengine.
Kila siku ya Jumatatu jioni tunawaweka kigodani viongozi wako.
Hapo tu tofauti.
Hapo tu kwa jipe kati ya alama 10.
Swali hili ni swali la utata sana. Watu wanaanguka kwa sababu ya maswali.
Na mwisho wa kuisha basi, lengo na shabaha ni kuhakikisha tunashajiisha uwazi na uwajibikaji katika safu zote za uongozi humu nchini.
They say that the aim of a constitutional democracy is to safeguard the rights of the minority while avoiding the tyranny of the majority.
Flag bearer wetu ni
that in politics, nothing happens by accident.
Nani alisaidia Uhuru Kenyatta 2013 akawa rais?
Opinion is the medium between knowledge and ignorance. As well, we as a fourth estate come in to separate the wheat from the chaff, fact from fiction. Dissecting for you the biggest political and governance issues in the Republic in the way only we can. Keeping tabs on the pulse of the nation.
Front and Center, Thursday nights on NTV. Kenya is a country of resilient, innovative, and hardworking people.
The sovereignty.
Our journey highlights major national divisions, the unity that followed, the gradual economic growth, and our daily struggles.
I call upon Nobel Peace Prize laureate for 2004, Wangari Maathai.
Our greatest achievements are our sports personalities.
He's still in podium position, contention here, and he seems to be coming in for the second position. Oh my God!
And our national pride is the unity of our diverse cultures. Our land is blessed with exotic tourist destinations that we boast of globally.
These are the deeply rooted principles of our national pride. Mimi Mkenya. The moment is here.
We are ready as the people of Kenya to make appropriate choices.
Hii uchaguzi itakuwa baina ya wafisadi na baina ya Wakenya ambao wanataka mabadiliko.
After months of grueling campaigns, debates and manifestos,
It's my humble opportunity to exercise your right to vote.
Tunakuja kuleta huo ukweli.
it is decision time.
We have election materials which are strategic materials.
We are all well prepared. As Kenyans prepare to go to the polls, NTV is on hand to bring you unrivaled coverage of Kenya's biggest election yet. Starting this Sunday, all the way until Election Day, join our team of talented journalists dotted across the country as they bring you a qualified blow-by-blow account of the home stretch.
We have our thermometers and our pulse checks on the ground.
2022 general elections would be nothing without the electorate.
Raila Odinga made a vote hunt in Western Kenya.
DP Ruto promised the Western counties the goodies.
We'll also unpack the numbers, trends, and election results in wall-to-wall broadcasting of your official election brands, Decision 2022 and Maamuzi 2022, only on NTV.
It's a coffee yogurt, Dad?
It's not just a yogurt. It's Royal Coffee Yogurt.
Flow with the sweet taste of thick and smooth Royal Fresh coffee yogurt. Royal Fresh, the royal taste of freshness.
Very good morning. 7 days to the election, Decision 2022. This is our coverage for the election. My name is James Smart.
All right, and I'm Zainab Ismail. Of course, we are still continuing to take a look at what's within and inside the Daily Nation and the Standard newspaper, as well as the other newspapers as well. Just as we were taking a quick run through the Standard, I think one of the stories, we've mentioned it, but allow me to just give you a look. And okay, my newspaper is not behaving, but here. I had power but didn't harm you despite insults, Uhuru tells Ruto. Well, President Uhuru Kenyatta scoffed at claims that he's plotting to harm Deputy President William Ruto and his running mate Rigathi Gachagua, condemning the pair for their, in quote, anger. The president said he has remained silent as Ruto and Gachagua insulted him for 3 years. That is what we will be starting on our conversation as I introduce our panelists this morning. Ruth Ambogo, Youth and Policy Governance Expert, and Jim India, a political analyst. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us this morning.
Thank you so much.
Interesting times indeed, of course. Just 7 days to the election. Interesting remarks in, you know, the political scene. The president, you had, I think, what he said, and of course the deputy president as well, what he said earlier on, and you know, there's that response and back and forth. I don't know what you make of it. I'll begin with you, Ruth.
Well, the last time I was here, I said that the last few days towards the election are very critical in terms of the kind of statements that our political leaders will make. Critical in what sense? In the sense of how these statements will either influence people to vote for them, influence people to begin to think of violence, influence people in whatever particular direction that politicians would want to influence the society. And it's quite unfortunate, some of the remarks that are coming out of the campaign trail, especially these last few days. Some of those statements are quite inflammatory, statements that would make Kenyans really begin to ask themselves, what kind of plans do these politicians have beyond the vote, you know? Where are they thinking of leading us? In which direction do they want to lead us to? Because when you start hearing people claiming that, you know, their family members will either be harmed or they do not want their family members to be harmed, as a Kenyan, you sit and ask yourself, is there some imminent danger that you're not telling us about, you know? Have you received intel that your family is in danger? what do we make of this? Or is it also some reverse psychology tactic to make, to just buy sympathy from Kenyans, you know? Because, I mean, these are distinguished politicians. These are people who have been in office for quite some time. I'm seeing the president saying that I had power, but I didn't harm you, despite the insults. I mean, I look at such statements and I'm like, one might want to look at it from an innocent eye and say that indeed, he's making some sense that if you rebelled against my administration, you went around campaigning in my backyard when we were still in power, you have done everything to discredit my term in office, my second term in office. You have literally made it look like I have achieved absolutely nothing during my second term in office. And I was in a position to do anything that I could, but I didn't do anything to you. One can innocently look at it from that point of view. But a critically thinking Kenyan would want to ask themselves, what kind of message are they trying to communicate? Is it the message that is being communicated? Is it that when you have power in this country, you can absolutely do anything, you know? Are there instances where some of these leaders have had absolute power and have done ridiculous things with this power, you know? Are we being told that, you know, when you have ultimate power, there's as limitless as, I mean, limitless things that you can do with it, that you can decide to harm or not harm, you know? So I think for me, people really need to be careful about what they say between now and the elections. And the bodies that are responsible for ensuring that we have a peaceful election really need to move in fast, you know? But unfortunately, they also cannot do so much right now, in the sense that even if they would want to enforce and say that between now and the last day of the campaigns, if any politician is found making inflammatory remarks, we will arrest them. You can imagine the impact of, I mean, what that would have to the electorate. The support that these key top leaders have right now is very fanatical, to the sense that you try and make any move right now against, I mean, any move, try and arrest any politician right now, the kind of chaos you would cause would just be unexplainable.
Absolutely. So to the question, let's bring Tim to this conversation. What amount of what's happening between the president and his deputy and the fluff, you know, and the questions and the response and all those things, what amount of it is of importance to Kenyans that we should focus and say this has a governance question we should resolve, perhaps, because there's something between the two that is going on? What amount of it is just emotions and something between two people that in 7 days, as soon as we resolve this question of election, then it will mean nothing?
I mean, when I heard that statement, it reminded me of the late game member of parliament, Jacob Midio, sensationally claiming, Baba, they want to kill you. If any of you guys remember, and those were his exact words, and he said that in Nyanza. And there's a reason why he made those statements. When you look at where Ruto made the statements, he made it when he was home. The idea is we are the home stretch, and politicians need to whip up emotions. And they have, Kenya Kwanza have stuck on message. They have been talking about the economy, they've been talking about having a plan, and now they have abandoned that plan. Now they're at a place where they need to whip up emotions, because when you're at your backyard, not only do you need people to vote with their heads, you need people to vote with their emotions at this point. You need people to turn up, and the only way you get people to turn up to vote is when they are passionate enough, when they know that there is more at stake beyond the price of unga, there's more at stake beyond the plan that you've been telling us. It's very personal. So you need to make the election very personal for people. And that's the direction that Kenya Kwanza is going right now. And that will be their message for the entire week that's going to happen. And the president is not helping, because the more he responds, the more Raila Odinga is no longer in the picture. This is no longer a contest between Uhuru Kenyatta and Raila Odinga, between William Ruto and Raila Odinga. This is a contest between William Ruto trying to protect this country from the president coming in through a third term, through Raila Odinga. And so if you listen to William Ruto, he's no longer talking about Raila Odinga. He's now only talking about the president. If you listen to them during the debates, they were not talking about the candidate Raila Odinga. They were only talking about the president, because that is the only way, again, within Mount Kenya, you whip up emotions. You tell these people that, look, he's been president for the last 10 years, and we have an opportunity to ensure that he does not continue being president by voting in a different person.
Right. that's the sort of the problem with this election. That it's sort of like a false election in a way, because it's foggy. With the issues that are on the ballot, and for the longest time, trying to clarify, what are the issues on the ballot in this election? Yeah. It's very clear in other elections, whether voting for integrity, whether voting for Chapter 10 of the Constitution. There's always been a thing, at least maybe from 2010 moving forward. What's this election about?
You know, it depends on how, it depends on whether you want to look at it from, look at all the candidates together and try and assess whether there are issues or not, or try to be specific about the individual candidates and what they stand for. In all honesty, I think that this particular election seems to have been defined along the lines of we are fighting corruption, we are recapturing the state from the hands of those who have tried to loot the country dry, versus we want to improve the economy. It looks like it seems to be a battle between these two ideas of improving the economy and the fight against corruption. So there are two sections. There's Kenya Kwanza that believes that, you know, the biggest issue that the country is facing is the economic status that we are at as a country, the fact that, you know, Kenyans cannot, the cost of living being very high. And so for them, most of their propositions are, let's set aside money for this, let's set aside money for that, let's set aside money for the other. But then you have on this side, Azimio that believes that for us as a country, the main reason why we are where we are is because of the high level of corruption that we face, that we experience as a country. And by the way, it is not just an issue that is coming from nowhere. I mean, even global statistics have indicated that in terms of corruption, in terms of the corruption index, we are performing very, poorly. We are performing very badly, and we are at a critical state where if we could put a stop to corruption, then in one way or another, we could actually resolve even most of these economic questions that we are talking about. And we would establish sort of like an honesty culture moving forward, where we have a stable country, where we know that you earn, you earn what you work for, you get paid for what you work for. Basically, it's a culture where your efforts are rewarded, yeah? As opposed to a culture where once I'm in office, I decide who gets what jobs, who gets what tenders, you know, preferential treatment based on who you know. So I think that for me, it seems as if it's sort of like a very clear election, but the message is getting lost along the way as we are getting towards the end of the road. And I agree with him that, you know, we are now getting to a point where people are saying, how do we personalize this for you? You know, how do we make you vote from your heart as opposed to your head? And there's a danger to that, because ideally in an election, I should, until the last day, still ask you, why should I vote for you? And the answer should not be that my kids are going to be killed. I mean, if the answer is that my kids are going to be killed, how many, or rather I perceive that, I foresee that my kids' life is in danger. How many of us lose children during elections, you know? How many families have lost their loved ones during elections? If that is the answer, it should never get to a point where the personal reason why I'm voting for you is to protect you as an individual, because that is ideally where you're driving us to. I mean, if we are going by the argument that India is giving, that we are saying that now we are moving from issues and we want to give you a very personal reason why you should vote. If the personal reason is that I, as a candidate, vote for me because my kids' lives are in danger, what about us, you know? At the end of the day, because what I'm trying to say is that at the end of the day, these emotions that you are trying to whip up so that people can vote for you will not end after I have ticked or put a mark against your name. These are the emotions that will be sustained right after the elections. Because now people will be saying, oh, you know, you lost this election because the election was rigged. It is these kinds of emotions that we are trying to get out of the election. Okay. And if possible, I think that we as the electorate, I mean, personally, I think that we as the electorate are the ones who are failing ourselves by failing to put to account to these leaders that, look, we tell you, look, when you come to our place, please stick to the issues, tell us exactly what you're going to do for us. Till the end of the road, you know? Young people right now need to insist on continue telling us until the last day, what are you planning to do for us as young people, you know? As opposed to, what are your personal interests in this particular election? So I think that leaders need to remove what their personal interests are and continue focusing on the issues. And we as the electorate need to insist that, look, at this particular point, we don't care what your personal interests are. We want to know what are you going to do for us.
Look, we're going to get to the latest opinion polls released. And, you know, we're seeing the numbers sort of shift a little bit. But then again, 7 days, and we only have about 6 days for the homestretch campaigns. Does it change anything? Let me begin with Jim. Does it change anything? I mean, these 6 days, we've seen intense schedules from both the political camps, the Azimio camp and the Kenya Kwanza camp. And with the period of time that is left, and we've seen, you know, the numbers that sort of will be voting in what direction over the next, you know, in the next 6 days. But then these 6 days, will it change anything?
It definitely would. I mean, the latest opinion polls, I think they're placing Raila at 46, Ruto at about 44, and the undecided vote is being placed at about 5%. Now that's the contest. That's where the real contest is. Because a lot of people who are going to vote for Raila or Ruto, they have already decided. But there's this silent majority, 5% of 22 million voters.
But are they undecided, or perhaps they're just shy of, you know, saying it and expressing that? Yeah.
Honestly speaking, because I work a lot with young people, I work a lot in the civil society space, and you work with young people. The reality is most of them are undecided and perhaps do not even see a reason why they should vote, because they do not see, they have not seen for the last 5 years how voting helps them. They have seen their parents vote their entire lives. They have not seen how their parents voting has changed the lives of their parents. And so, and then it's also tedious and tiresome. I mean, you're asking me to go line up the whole day. It's a lot more difficult. A lot of the undecided people are the young people, the first-time voters. Because those who voted before, voting is very habitual. Anyone who's voted before, it becomes part of your nature to just keep voting. But anyone who's voting for the first time, it takes a lot to actually get them out to vote. And that's why these last 6 days are important, particularly for that 5% who are undecided. Because the politician has to do two things. One, convince them that there's a reason why they need to vote for them. But also, number two, convince that those even who have decided to vote for them turn up to vote. Because voter turnout has always been an issue. From 75, it always scintillating between 75 to 80%. How do we ensure that whoever needs to win needs to get 50% plus one? The opinion polls are not placing any of the candidates at 50% plus one. The secret is you need to get your people out to vote. If they don't get out to vote, then we are on for a runoff.
Let's talk about this turnout and the polls as we, because it's a natural sort of progression to it. Yeah. Every time we see, you know, the numbers, I think they've progressed pretty well. No one is hitting the 50, you know, plus one, as Tim is talking about. The question on the turnout then becomes important. Talk to me about the other candidates. What happened to Wajakoya, who hopefully people thought was making the, you know, the 10% to sort of break this thing? What has happened to the other sort of presidential candidates?
Lack of hard work on the ground. I think it's lack of seriousness.
Is it really? We've seen Wajakoya
let me tell you,
out there.
When I talk about seriousness, I mean, my assessment for seriousness is how much have you how much have you invested in your ads, you know? Because at the end of the day, one thing I've realized about Kenyans also is that some of these undecided voters usually vote based on who is likely to win. Like on the last day of the election, just a few days before the election, they're voting in terms of where do I see the government going, you know? Not necessarily who is the most preferred candidate for me. And where do I see the government going, who do I see likely winning, is usually determined on what's your presence, how much do we see you, you know? For instance, somebody like Maure, I have not seen not even a single poster. Let's not even talk about a billboard. You know, MCAs literally put posters on. You walk around the roads and you see MCA posters around. I have not seen not even a single poster on the roads, not a single billboard anywhere, you know? Because that's part of, in as much as one would want to say that, look, billboards do not determine who you vote for, these billboards contain messaging, you know, some of these billboards actually talk about what you want to do for the people. Like when you look at the most recent Azimio billboards, they are literally putting out the messaging of Azimio and what they want to do for the people. You go online, and it doesn't even have to be that, because I understand that elections are very expensive, billboards are expensive. I mean, simple ads, simple online ads, you know, you don't see them anywhere. You don't even know what they stand for.
But these things are expensive.
It is very expensive. I have attempted to vie. In this particular election, I attempted to vie. It was very expensive. But some effort is needed. Let's see you on the campaign trail. I mean, let us see you on media. Let us see you during rallies on media talking about what you want to do for the people. Where are these people campaigning? For Wajakoya, I think where he missed it, and he would have actually captured when he started off, he seems to have captured the attention of young people, but where he got it off is, no offense, his messaging and his manifesto. In as much as sometimes people want to be theatrical and dramatic to sort of capture the attention of people, at some point you have to put away the drama or have some schedules for when the drama is necessary and when the seriousness gets in, you know.
Right.
Yeah, like his manifesto, he had a proper opportunity. By the time he was getting to the point of launching his manifesto, he had already captured the attention of young people.
Yes.
And you could literally hear young people saying, you know what, honestly, I was not going to vote, but I'm now going to vote for this person. Right now, if you go on social media platforms, and we take jokes, like especially TikTok right now. I am seriously, this campaign, I have seriously been studying how young people are using TikTok as a campaign, as a campaign platform.
Right.
And you see the kind of messaging young people are putting out right now is, I will try and say it as they say it, after August 9th, we will tell Wajackoyah yenyewe hatukuwa serious. Pole, ilikuwa jokes, you know. Hatukuwa serious, ilikuwa jokes. Ilikuwa jokes.
Kwani hujui jokes?
Kwani hujui jokes. You get, that's what people are saying right now on TikTok.
Right.
And it's because he failed to capture them at the messaging. At that point when he was launching his manifesto, he should have told young people what I will do for you in terms of when it comes to unemployment, how I will create jobs for you young people.
But we saw a lot of excitement among the young people, by the way, when he was mentioning, you know, like, for example, you know, the weed part.
No, but you see, I mean, the thing is, at the end of the day, people now begin to ask themselves, how practical are your solutions? Right. You know, you've already captured our attention, but now give us practical solutions. Give us things that make sense to us. Right. And then also, where is he campaigning? No offense, I understand that everywhere is a campaign for a politician. Every crowd is a potential crowd for you to campaign at. But when you focus mostly at campaigning at bars, you're mostly in bars. You know, people who are drinking will not take you very seriously at that particular point in time. So I think he has tried to do as much as he can, but I feel like he lost it on the messaging. I feel that he could have done a bit more in terms of, he could have been a bit more serious when it came to his messaging. Right. And he would have literally tried to tilt the scales, but
he could have, but he didn't.
He could have, but he did not. Yeah.
Wajackoyah captured the attention, obviously, of the nation, because I think at that time there was this sort of, it was boring between, you know, Raila and Ruto. They were not saying anything new, nothing fresh. So this guy shows up in the middle, and with a completely different messaging, you know, talking about, you know, what we'll do with weed and that sort of thing. So he captured the attention. Right. True. What did he do? Where did he go wrong?
I've just seen the deputy president, Wajackoyah's deputy president, somewhere around here, so I'll be as nice to them as possible.
Because they're building.
But truth be told is, they did a good job. They did the good job of saying, how do we navigate through this? We're being called, you know, tunaitwa punda, and there are two horses. How do we, as a punda, show up really well for this election? And they had a pretty good plan. If you listen to Wajackoyah talk about weed, they spoke about weed to the extent that they could sell it to anyone. Yes. If you listen to the deputy presidential debate, they convinced some of us that this is actually a business we should get into. Right. They convinced us that we should sell whatever it is, you know, snake venom, and it is a good thing for this country. Right. They sold it to us. The problem was, the moment they started selling it to us, and a lot of Kenyans said, okay, this sounds exciting. But if you look at Wajackoyah now, it's about 1 or 2%, and then the two leading candidates, that's Raila Odinga and William, they have gained about 2% margin, which means that whichever vote he had have gone to them. A lot of these guys, that's why Raila, through his proxy, said, when Raila becomes president, he will think about weed. Because they started realizing that there's actually a vote, because there are people who listen to them. But because Wajackoyah could not sustain his campaign, and this is what Ruth is talking about, because of the nature of our elections, because of the policies that we put in place, it is too damn expensive for any common person like myself, like Ruth, like Wajackoyah, to actually run a presidential candidate and have a chance at winning. Because if IBC is saying is capping it at 5 billion to run a presidential election, we do not have the financial muscle to do that. And so just by that fact, anybody, no matter how brilliant your ideas are, no matter how radical your ideas are, if you do not have the money, you cannot win, you cannot run a successful presidential candidate. Peter Kenneth has tried it before. Musalia Mudavadi has tried it before. They have all tried it before, people that we know and we've seen them, but they've not been able to put up a spirited fight because they don't have the financial muscle.
Indeed. And I think, sorry, just to add to that, I think also, it's also the familiarity with the electorate, that I think some of these politicians might want to do a little bit more, just beyond the elections. Where are you this past, the 5 years before the elections? Where have you been? You know, I think it's also that name recognition that the top two candidates enjoy, that they have been in the political space all along. Then you suddenly come and expect that you will gather a significant percentage of the electorate to vote for you. So I think for people like Wajackoyah, if he's very serious about his campaigns, then maybe after this election, he might want to appear more, remain relevant during the next 5 years, be present, comment on issues, take a stance on most of these issues. And then maybe in 2027, he might have gathered himself, a significant following on the basis of how he has sustained himself within the political campaign period. And then I also think that for people like him also, the lack of that grassroots network in terms of you have roots as a party, but how many candidates are vying on that
the strength of the party.
Yeah, because sometimes the popularity of the candidate is also pushed by the other the other people who are vying for the various seats that are not necessarily the presidential seat. So they basically boost you by giving you their support base. So you gain the numbers through their support base.
Right.
So if their parties can invest in making sure that the parties are stronger between now after these elections and the next elections, then maybe they will be able to garner a more significant vote base.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the opinion, back to the opinion polls, we're talking about 45%, 46%, but and just like Smart said, no one is really hitting that 50%, threshold, and we need a 50% plus that one vote, and that talks of possibly a runoff. Jim, from your own assessment, from where you see it, how do you see this vote going?
If the opinion polls are anything to go by, not to say that I don't trust in science, but they have not been anything to go by for the last 2 elections. They have not predicted the election as they should have, at least in 2013 and 2017. They were way off in 2013, I think. Because Kenyans tend to surprise you on election day. They tend to because the way we vote from the family unit. Majority vote from the family unit. And so my father will whip up his entire household and show them up to vote.
Right.
And so if I have a younger brother, and I do, who's not decided who's going to vote for, my father will ensure that he votes for the candidate that my father is voting for. And so because of that nature, there's a chance that we'll have a higher turnout of people voting, but also number 2, that the 50%, someone might actually get to the 50%. But the only way they get to that 50%, as I said earlier, it's on turnout in your strongholds, because they have strongholds. If you're getting a 90–95% at your stronghold, then you have a pretty good chance of hitting the 50% plus 1. However, we have seen how this balances out, because it's almost like a repeat of 2017, just that Raila Odinga is trying to get slightly higher numbers in Central, and William Ruto is trying to get slightly higher numbers in Western.
Right.
But it's sort of that repeat. So how do we ensure then that when we are going to this election, those 2 vote blocks get it higher, but that Raila Odinga and William Ruto excite their vote base enough to turn up. If they don't turn up, then you're going for a runoff, because in a runoff, then it's a simple majority. In a simple majority contest, then it could go either way. So at this point, and I think it's an exciting election, that you are neck to neck until the very last minute. And so it's up to the voter to actually show up to vote, to actually come out and vote and decide for their candidate. Because without the plus 1, and that's what I keep telling everybody, that they need 50% plus 1. So without the 1 vote, and it's literally 1 vote that they need, your vote might be the 1 vote that the candidate needs to actually win this election on the 9th of August.
All right. Smart, I know you want to ask that question, but before that, let me just get Ruth's sentiments as well on this whole issue. It's quite intriguing with the fact that if none of them are hitting that 50 plus 1 vote, it's most likely that we might head to, but Jim says this is according to opinion polls, which have not been, very credible in the past elections. But in case this happens, where do we go from now as a country after the 9th August election? We're going back to the ballot.
Well, where we go back, what will happen, what I foresee happening in case we have a runoff is that there will be more spirited campaigns. The campaigns will be even more spirited than they are now.
Right.
Because at that particular point, we are only going into the presidential, we are only going into the presidential election campaign. And
so we're just
at that
focusing
time,
on
we are just,
candidates.
At that point, we'll just be focusing on those 2 candidates. So that means everybody who is in their backyard right now campaigning for themselves will have been done with their elections, and they are now focusing on campaigning for the presidency. And I think such is it's a situation that I wouldn't want us to get into based on how volatile our elections can become. Because now when you see all these energies coming together just to focus on an election for two people, you can imagine the kind of messaging that will be coming out of that kind of last minute, you know, the second round of campaigns, the kind of intense energy that, you know, that second round of campaigns will have. But of course, I also know that, I also appreciate that Kenyans, after our experiences in the past, have gotten to a point where we understand that elections are just that, you know, they come and go. From our lessons that we have learned from our past experiences, especially with violent elections, we have understood that when we fight, we are the ones who suffer at the end of the day. You know, when we fight ourselves, when we find ourselves propagating violence because of elections, it is we who will end up suffering, not the political class. So in as much as there will be intense campaigns, I don't see anything much coming out of it. But what I know is that it will be very spirited. There'll be a lot of energy focusing on, a lot of serious campaigns around those two candidates. And what will also happen is, in the past, what has happened is that, for the last 2017 elections, when we were going into the second round, we noticed that some of those presidential candidates aligned themselves to the president, which I don't know if there was any significant value to them aligning themselves to the president because they didn't really have as many votes. But at that particular point, I think it will be critical. Wajakoya with his 300,000 votes, whoever he chooses to align with, he will have added some votes to that particular candidate. Mwaure with the number of votes that he will have gathered, whoever he will choose to align himself with, that will also be a plus for them. So the election might be determined by where these two other candidates where the two other candidates will decide to choose to align themselves.
Let's not forget how it will take us 60 days after the 9th of August that we'll have 2 months of campaigns. Right now, what has happened in the economy is you're talking to anyone who's doing business, they're telling you after Bade Uchaguzi, we'll meet after election. And so we're having another 2 months of that. The economy is going to struggle big time. You're already looking at inflation that's so high. Prices of goods and commodities are so high. I think the hit on the economy will be worse should we go for a runoff.
All right, Stephen Ruth, with 20 minutes past 7 and 7 days to the elections, just about to take a short break. When we come back, we'll have plenty more on the question on the elections, and most importantly, why should you be voting this time, and what is tilting the numbers? You're watching NTV.
They say that the aim of a constitutional democracy is to safeguard the rights of the minority while avoiding the tyranny of the majority.
Flag bearer wetu ni
that in politics, nothing happens by accident.
Nani alisaidia Uhuru Kenyatta 2013 akawa rais?
Opinion is the medium between knowledge and ignorance. That's where we as a fourth estate come in to separate the wheat from the chaff, fact from fiction. Dissecting for you the biggest political and governance issues in the Republic in the way only we can. Keeping tabs on the pulse of the nation.
Front and Center, Thursday nights on NTV.
At each stage of your business cycle, there are different opportunities and challenges. Has your business evolved and made strides to adapt and be the best in your field? Enter the 2022 Top 100 Mid-Sized Companies Survey and showcase how you have driven success at every stage of your business. Submit your entry at www.eastafricatop100.com. Survey closes on 9th September 2022. Top 100 SMEs. Be seated among the great.
The Capital Markets Authority is the regulator responsible for supervising, licensing and monitoring the activities of market intermediaries. This includes the Securities Exchange, the Central Depository and Settlement Corporation and all the other persons licensed under the Capital Markets Act. CMA works with intermediaries and stakeholders to create a conducive environment for raising the level of investor awareness by focusing on the importance of knowledge, saving attitude and the best practices for investment in the capital markets.
With as little as 2,000 shillings, with as little as 10,000 shillings, you can become an owner of a publicly listed company, and you can earn dividends at the end of the year if they decide to issue dividends.
CMA collaborates with strategic partners to provide accurate information on all aspects within the capital markets, including regulations which facilitates investors with safe investment opportunities.
Capital markets are open to everybody. They accommodate you in the position you are in. Capital markets is very highly regulated. The issue of safety, ensuring you are dealing with parties who are regulated.
In line with one of its key strategies, CMA continues to support various capital rising products such as real estate investment trusts, bonds, as well as the various listing platforms, with emphasis on how investors and shareholders of listed companies are protected.
I'm able to monitor and know the safety of my money. And the other thing is that to know that I can always get my investment when I need that money.
Kenya is a country of resilient, innovative, and hardworking people.
The sovereignty.
Our journey highlights major national divisions, the unity that followed, the gradual economic growth, and our daily struggles.
I call upon Nobel Peace Prize laureate for 2004, Wangari Maathai Maathai.
Our greatest achievements are our sports personalities.
He's still in podium position, contention here, and he seems to be coming in for the second position. Oh my God!
And our national pride is the unity of our diverse cultures. Our land is blessed with exotic tourist destinations that we boast of globally. These are the deeply rooted principles of our national pride. Mimi Mkenya.
It's a coffee yogurt, Dex?
It's not just a yogurt. It's Royal Coffee Yogurt.
Flow with the sweet taste of thick and smooth Royal Fresh coffee yogurt. Royal Fresh, the royal taste of freshness.
All right, welcome back. This is Decision 2022, and in the next 7 days, Kenyans will be lining up to elect their next batch of leaders who will be forming the next government. And of course, very interesting turn of events this week with the homestretch campaigns, and IEBC is also in its most defining moment, and we will be looking at some of the preparations they have put in place. And of course, on the final poll and in its calendar, the IEBC has started deploying material material as well as poll officials and ahead of next week's polls, and expects the last batch of all materials to be used in the election to arrive by Wednesday, and that is that last batch of materials which will be arriving on the 3rd of August. And yesterday the IEBC also launched a media center that will be helping the media just take a look at the election process from the beginning till the very end, the voting as the tallying continues, and of course the counting of papers, Forms 34A, Forms 34B as they're coming to the National Tallying Center at the Bomas of Kenya, so that we will be relaying those votes and of course that count simultaneously as well as the IEBC as they upload on their portal. So Smart, I think IEBC has done quite a, a lot of work within this last couple of weeks, but also faced quite a huge challenge. Enormous challenges, quite some work there to get involved with, 46,233 polling stations across the country that need electoral materials. Actually 229, 46 to 229. Yes, right. Yes, they revised that, yes. Yeah. All these sort of polling stations need all the materials, they need all the kits, they need to have officials in them, there needs to be an election happening in those centers at the same time, then relay results at the end of the voting process. Again, I think the logistical questions that IEBC faces mostly is not only just to deploy this, the materials, but at the day of the election, people, can they vote? Will the ballot arrive on time? And when they are on time, are people identified correctly? Do we make sure that dead people, for instance, don't show up and vote? Do we make sure that, the people who didn't show up to vote for that day in that polling station, someone doesn't vote for them and increase votes for them? For the last two elections, there's been an interesting sort of question that has never been answered, I think, by the two Supreme Courts. The fact that people go to vote and it's six elections in one. Right. And you have a number of people, I think last time was about 1.3 million people who voted for the president alone, and the 5 ballots are non-existent. And that question has never been resolved. And that is the thing that we talk about suspicion and the question we bring about elections on election day, that something happens that really brings the whole question of elections into conspiracy, into questions, of integrity and that sort of thing. And this is one of the problems that, I think the last 3 weeks, IEBC and the questions, that has been facing on, which voter register are we going to use? Are we going to use manual or a complementary system plus electronic? Will we make sure that the KIMS kit, for instance, sends the results from the polling station itself and then to the Bomas of Kenya, and there's, sort of like a way to track that for every KIMS kit that they have. And that has been a question that, will be clarified as IEBC sets the media center. But just to bring our panelists back to the conversation on the questions that, still remains unanswered about, like you said, the question on, how people vote, the question of voter turnout, but the question of that there are no games being played by anyone, at this point. Right. Tim.
Just to pick up from where you left, I remember Justice Moki Nonjala putting the IEBC lawyers to test really to talk about the difference between a spoiled ballot and a spoiled vote. Because when you walk into a polling station, you get all six ballot papers. You're not just given one. You don't say, I'm here only for the MCA, just give me that one. You get all 6 of them. And if you don't want to vote, it means you will have to cast a ballot that's not marked into the ballot box. And at the end of the day, it has to be counted as a spoiled ballot. One of the things that we have to guard against, again, is last time you saw the number of spoiled votes was more than the number 3 or number 4 presidential candidates. The spoiled votes are way more than that. So how do we guard against it? Number 2, the problem has always been at the counting. We seem to get to know it is for 6,229 very well. We seem to know 500,000, the number of people we need. But just when it gets to counting how many votes people, a presidential candidate actually got, that's where IEBC usually seems to mess it up. Is the transmission going to work this time round? Remember that the Supreme Court ruled that the vote is final. Whatever is announced at the polling station, that's the final result. The parties then all the parties involved need to deploy enough agents at those polling stations, because now you also have to protect your vote at this point, where we are not sure whether our servers are going to be working, because remember there was a question of servers. But if you go back to the 2013 and the 2017 Supreme Court cases, at the heart of it was a process issue. They said, how does it, take us through, in those who are in corporate, they talk about like the customer journey. What does the customer journey look like at IEBC? From me getting my ID to finally me putting in my ballot to finally the elections being relayed. And IEBC has never been really able to map out that customer journey and tell us exactly what happens at every stage of that process. So at the heart of it, we'll be looking at the process, because the Supreme Court decision said the final verdict, right, the end must be as good as the process itself.
All right.
And so if at any point in this process we get it wrong, then we know that there will be a contestation of the end result.
I think one of the things that we've had continuously, especially from election observers, is the issue of communication from the electoral body, but also the issue of voter education. So I think that has been quite a huge problem for IEBC. Do you think it can still be able to sort of manage the expectation of Kenyans and sort of be able to give the right information to Kenyans and the electorate who are going to vote in this election, so that they understand by the time I'm going to a polling station, these are the steps that I'm going to undertake?
Unfortunately, I don't think they could. Last time we had Ezra Chiloba doing a lot of the communication, and so immediately after the election he was fired by the chairman. This time we have a CEO, I think, who is not as vocal as Ezra Chiloba was, so I assume that the chairman will be the one doing a lot of communication with the public. And that is where we got it wrong, because we seem to be getting mixed signals every time that they were speaking. They were saying one thing, we were saying different things on TV, and then the process is also taking painfully long. One thing that we've learned about Kenyans during election is that we do not want it to take that long. And so you cannot keep us in waiting 3, 4, 5 days later. You're still, what are you counting? Because it was already announced at the polling station. There's a live transmission happening. How long do you need to actually tabulate? And so they're going to have to do really well in terms of how they communicate to the public. They have to communicate to the public constantly. We have to predict how often they're going to speak to us. The same way they can go speak with Mutahi, the CES for Health, on how he was communicating to the public during the pandemic. He did a very good job on how to speak to the public. He had a very great, managed our expectations very well. And I think IEBC could borrow a leaf from there on how do you manage anxiety that just comes with an election.
Right. Ruth.
In fact, I was actually just going to talk about, I was going to give an example of the pandemic times, that, and I was going to say that the media center ought to have been set up earlier. I mean, some of these suspicions and that we've been having over the last few weeks would have been addressed if there was a proper media center in place. So I think as part of the timelines of IEBC, maybe they need to revise that, instead of having a media center just a few days to the elections, have it, 2 months,
all the structures in place.
Put all the structures in place, have a center that is already operational, so that when all these questions that were coming up, when all these questions started coming up, they should have been addressed at a proper media center, with a media center that you understand that, look, every day, at around this period of time, we'll be expecting a briefing from IEBC. That's part of managing expectations. When people know that at around this period of time, because that is how Mutahi Kagwe managed the pandemic, we always knew that at about 2 p.m. there was going to be an update. At about this particular time of the day, there was going to be an update. And that way your anxiety is pretty much contained, your restlessness is contained, your expectations are managed. So, and then also for me, when it comes to, my biggest issue with an election is the relaying of the results. The relaying of the results. That once the results have been announced at the constituency, rather at the polling station, how fast do these results get to the National Tallying Center?
Right.
And I think it will also
so
require.
You see that could be some sort of contestation there, because you probably will have the political parties. They've already tabulated all the results at the same time.
That's it. And IEBC is still withholding that information. And if I remember very well, at some point there was a media tiff with IEBC, where I think IEBC had said that media should not announce, the results before the IEBC does it. But media also has collaborations with political parties. So if a political party tells you, look, our agents are reporting this, will you not report it because IBC has said we have to wait for the final results.
But the official, the institution officially expected to announce the results lies with IBC.
I understand it lies with IBC, and I think for us as Kenyans, it is all about that anxiety that India is talking about.
Right.
That if we have to wait for 5 days after the elections, what are we waiting for? You know?
Right.
Because at the end of the day, the system is supposed to run smoothly. That once the results have been announced at the polling station, you submit, is it the form 34B? You submit it, is it via the KIMS kit, I think? You submit it, and the same is relied to IBC. I mean, if we could just have timely reporting that as soon as the results come in, and if we could have, I think they have said this time around they will be announcing at the constituency level results. So if we can just have, once you're done with the constituency, announce it. You know, don't keep Kenyans waiting for too long. So what we are hoping for is a seamless process. We are hoping that, you know, you vote, you don't have to wait for so long for the results to come in. And once the results come in, from wherever the results are coming in, as they come in, let them be announced as they come in. Let's not have those periods of, we are waiting for, you know, 1.5 days. We have an extended period of time without any reporting from IBC, because it will not make sense that you have an extended period of reporting from IBC and yet the results are continuously streaming in. What usually happens is that when you have quite some silence without reporting results, people begin to have suspicions of what could be happening behind the backs, you know, what's happening behind the scenes. Is there some cooking going on? That's why you start hearing narratives such as, oh, there could be some interference going on with the relaying of the results. So I think for us, we just hope for a seamless process. And also, I mean, your question on voter education for me is also very critical. The fact that this time round, I feel that IBC has taken quite some time before embarking on the voter education process. I feel that in the previous election, they did quite some good work. There was sufficient time for voter education to be done. Because when you don't have voter education being done, what tends to happen is that you will have a lot more people who need to be assisted to vote. And what you don't know is whether this assisted voting is someone influencing you to vote for the person they want you to vote for, or you being assisted to vote, you know? Because sometimes it could be that I have somebody who will assist me to vote. There are people who will assist persons who are unable to, who do not understand the process to vote. But in the process, what they are doing is they are influencing them to vote for whoever they personally want them to vote for. So voter education is very, very critical. And I mean, as much as possible, let IBC insist, you know, put in a little bit more effort these last few days to do as much of it as possible.
So just to, the biggest challenge in this election has been this question, and I think, you know, every election is the question on that suspicion that, you know, what happens way before the election. And Kenya Kwanza candidate William Ruto the other day spoke about chiefs and the involvement of the administration, you know, police service in that question. And the Kenya Kwanza has raised these questions publicly, that the chiefs are being used in a number of places to sort of, you know, tilt the numbers and help, you know, the Azimio coalition. It's not the first time we've had this same, you know, sort of questions raised by Raila Odinga in 2017.
Yes.
And this time, obviously, it's flipped. You know, Raila Odinga is assuring, you know, people of their safety and is calm, and the Kenya Kwanza is charged. So it's a bit of a different place to be in. But let's talk about these sort of questions on that comes about before very election. And Raila has these questions as well about, you know, IEBC and, you know, I think a month or 3 weeks ago when they made a threat that they will not go to an election if there's not going to be a manual register, in a sense. The question about administration, you know, service, you know, the provincial administration service, if you like, and the questions of chief particularly, you know, and their role in elections, and the suspicion that brings during elections. Talk to me around that.
So one of the things that has constantly happens is a book titled How to Rig Elections. Unfortunately, someone wrote a book about it. And one of the things that they speak on is how first weaken public institutions, attack public institutions so much, make them look so weak, so unreliable, create as much mistrust into public institutions like the IEBC, like the administration police. So attack every institution like the judiciary, so that when you come out to contest an election, people actually say, but we said from the very beginning the IEBC was compromised. We say that the police were compromised. We say that the judiciary was compromised. So we have a legitimate reason to refuse this result and say go to the streets or do whatever else that we need to do.
So some sort of psychological tactic?
It is a political strategy, number one, but not to say that there are no substantiated claims. I mean, there are legitimate claims there. If chiefs, for instance, have a role to play in an election, they do have a role to play. They have the role of ensuring safety of those who are going to vote, the chiefs and the administration police, ensure that there is safety of those who are going to vote, those who are managing elections, ensure that there is safety, ensure that there is safety of the vote that is being managed. But to the extent to which we've seen in the past, for instance, where police officers have been used to disrupt an election and there's tear gas being thrown at a polling station the whole day. People end up coming to vote at 5 and the polling station is closed at 6 p.m. So that's a deliberate tactic to ensure that people do not vote. So if you want to frustrate voter turnout, one of the ways is heighten up security. When you heighten up security, there will always be reason why there will be violence between the public and the police. People will always, you know, start throwing stones here and there and animosity. Tear gas will be thrown. People will be dispersed. Women will not come out to vote because most of the time when there's the threat of violence, women are most affected. And so the women will not turn up to vote because there's violence. When women don't turn up to vote, you are actually frustrating the democratic process. So to the extent that there are claims right now that there are plans to actually use the police to do that, that's a concern. Unfortunately, these are claims that have been laid to us by Raila Odinga in 2013 and in 2017, and they were rubbished. And now they're coming again in 2022, and unfortunately, they will be rubbished again. Again, if you look at the role of chiefs going door to door now, that's not the role of chiefs. They should not be going door to door to campaign. Chiefs should be going door to do civic education. But the time for civic education already lapsed. So I think that, again, those are some of the reasons I said if you go to the Supreme Court, you just need to attack the process. Anyone who has a process, they will say, there was a process, there was a problem in our constituency, police officers came and this is what they did, and as a result, we did not get the turnout that we needed.
Right, Ruth. Well, I think for me, whatever claims that come up between now and the elections really need to be substantiated. And when we talk about the role that chiefs play in an election, as he has mentioned, they play quite a lot of roles. And it's not just during the elections, but even before the elections. I mean, if we are to talk about how chiefs can tilt an election, you begin from the voter registration process. Not even, in fact, you don't even, the ID collection process, you know, where you find that in certain cases, it has been alleged that chiefs have been used to suppress, you know, the process of issuing out of IDs. You know, during the voter registration process, they frustrate, you know, they transfer votes. They frustrate those who want to register to vote based on whatever instructions they receive from wherever. So I think when you look at the role that chiefs play, it starts way back, you know. And I think that sometimes some of these issues need to be addressed before it is too late. That start arresting this problem at the origin point of view, at the point of view where people are beginning to register as voters. If there is any suspicions that chiefs are being involved in these processes, bring up those issues. Let these chiefs be subjected to some form of accountability. And if they are found culpable of participating in these claims that come up, let them be fired if possible, you know, just to send a message that, you know, you cannot be part of mishandling or mismanaging or leading to elections that are not free, fair, and credible. So I think that some of these issues really need to be addressed way before we get to this particular point, because now, I mean, where do you even start now, you know? Will you start by firing chiefs right now? Will you start by, what can you do between now and the elections? So for me, that is just it. And it is not just the chiefs only. I mean, most of these election actors, there's a lot that they can do to influence an election. And so for me, these are claims, these are first of all claims that need to be substantiated. And secondly, issues that need to be addressed way before it is too late. And also sometimes it could also just be a narrative, you know? It could also just be a narrative that, look, you're already, it could also just be all politics, that you're already foreseeing a situation where you might not get the desired electoral outcome that you wish to see. And so to set up precedents or to lay ground for a contested election, you begin coming up with those claims so that when an election is done, if it doesn't go your way, you start saying, look, we already said, as he had mentioned, we had already brought up the claims that chiefs were involved, you know? So I think some of it could be political narrative. If there's no evidence produced, it could be political narrative. If there is evidence produced, let's, you know, processes to keep this, to hold the various actors accountable begin.
Just before we go and talk about two things that I think have happened, and I think we'll be doing a disservice without giving some context. The question on how Western Kenya votes. Mudavadi needs 70% to get 30% of government. Like to get your views on that, and also Mike Sonko, shifting his base and getting to Kenya Kwanza. What does that do in specifically the Mombasa contestation race? Let's start with you from Western.
Yes. I think I've always said that unless you come from Western, you will consume a lot of misinformation about how Western Kenya will vote. And why I say so is because when we talk about political kingpins, the value of political kingpins continuously changes or shifts based on electoral cycles. And they change or shift based on various factors. Some of those factors are that maybe your influence has just generally dwindled. Other people have come up that have better, better value or have a better grip with the community than yourself. Certain factors such as the electorate becoming more and more informed, because what I've realized about the Kenyan elections is that the more we hold elections, the more Kenyans are getting informed about the value of an election, what kind of leaders to vote for, what influence these leaders, if any, have on them. And we are becoming more and more advanced in our way of thinking around elections. So that advancement for Western Kenya, what the effect it has had is that after some time, especially for when it comes to Musalia Mudavadi's influence, most people have come to the realization that despite all those years that Musalia Mudavadi has been in politics, he has literally had very minimal to show for in terms of the impact it has had on his influence has had on his people. And by impact, I mean, what value has your leadership had to us? Do we see any form of development, significant development that we would attribute to you, that would say that, look, by virtue of you being where you are, not necessarily being in government and holding any significant position, but by virtue of you socializing with those who are at the top decision-making platforms, we have been able to get, for instance, these kilometers of roads. We have been able to get, for instance, this number, and I mean, we've been able to get this type of development in our region based on your influence. So with Musalia Mudavadi, most people from his county, and that's a county that I come from, have realized that his significance, his impact has been very minimal on the development of the people. Vihiga County remains the same. You go to Vihiga County 10 years ago, come back. I mean, if you were in Vihiga County 10 years ago and visit Vihiga County right now, there's very little to show of in terms of change and development and progress. So that is informing the kind of influence that he has. Right now, in fact, just look at the opinion polls themselves say that ODM in Vihiga County actually has more influence than ANC. The last opinion polls I saw were indicating, and it is not just mere opinion polls, it is the reality. In terms of the gubernatorial seat, ODM is going to retain Vihiga County. The current Vihiga County governor is an ODM governor, and he's going to retain his seat. He's likely to retain his seat. The senator for Vihiga County is likely not to come from ANC, and ANC is likely to get very few seats when it comes to the member of parliament position. So, when you're talking about 70% of the vote, you should begin from your own backyard. That give us that 70% in your own county before you even think about the other 4 counties from Western Kenya. ODM's influence in the other counties is also quite significant. With the introduction of the other political parties such as DAP, DAP seems to control a particular section of Bungoma, but ODM's influence in Kakamega is still quite significant and quite relevant. ODM's influence in Busia County is also quite, it's very high. So there's very little that Musalia Mudavadi will do in terms of numbers to deliver to the Kenya Kwanza Brigade. One thing I'd say is that Moses Wetangula might actually deliver more numbers, or rather might have more influence in these elections with the Western vote, because he will fully, if not, I mean, he is likely to
he'll retain his seat.
He'll retain his seat first of all, and then he will surpass probably 60% of the Bungoma vote. He'll deliver probably 60% of the Bungoma vote to the Kenya Kwanza Brigade. Unlike Musalia, who might only deliver probably 30% of Vihiga vote to Kenya Kwanza Brigade. So in terms of the Western Bloc vote, I think the people who are advising the Deputy President need to be honest with him. he will not get as much as he thinks he will. And that is one of the determinant areas that he is talking about, or rather, that his team seems to be focusing on in terms of tilting the numbers to his side. For Raila Odinga, all he needs from the central Kenya region is probably 25–30%, which he's, from the opinion polls, he's likely to garner that 25–30% from the central Kenya region. So Western, for Kenya Kwanza, let them not have, I mean, very high hopes. Okay. We'll be back here on August.
We will hold you to this.
I will be back here
in just about 7 days.
In about 7 days, we'll have you sit right there.
August 11.
Yes.
We will be here.
Yes, and tell about your market. Talk to me about Sonko and Sonko's move to get into Kenya Kwanza and the impact that has on the gubernatorial seat in Mombasa.
So, of course, we've talked about the Sonkonization of Nairobi politics for a long time and how Mike Sonko managed, through Sonko Rescue Team, to go to the grassroots. He managed to have such a strong network with the informal settlements in Nairobi to the point that he got more votes than any presidential candidate in the city. And so when he moved to Mombasa, one of the things that everyone knew was he used the same strategy. Came up with the Sonko Rescue Team, again started going into the informal settlements in Mombasa. And he captured the imagination of the people of Mombasa. He played into the dynamics that are in Mombasa. He became, all of a sudden, the alternative choice that they had as the people of Mombasa, and they were willing to vote for him, were it not for the court case that barred him from running for election. Him switching, now before that we saw him with the president, just before the court case, the decision. We saw him with the president, and the talk was he's perhaps coming in to support Igathe in Nairobi, who was seemingly struggling to connect with the local people in Nairobi, and as well campaign for himself in Mombasa. And guys are like, Sonko can actually do this. After the court case, Mike Sonko then, of course, yesterday or the day before that, we saw him cross over to Kenya Kwanza. What he brings to the table there is Hassan Omar now, if they work together, we know that they have not seen eye to eye. We've heard the things that Hassan Omar has said about Sonko, but they are no permanent enemies in politics. I think he brings quite a huge number of votes to Hassan Omar. Complicates the matter for Abdul Samad and ODM in Mombasa.
So you're saying this is actually going to sort of create a significant impact in
it is going to
in that election.
At the governor's race, it is going to create an impact at the governor's race, just because there are people who legitimately believe that Mike Sonko is a representation of the leader that they want in Mombasa. There are people who legitimately believe he's the solution. And there are people who he's crossing over, he crosses over with them. They are Mike Sonko loyalists who will go with him wherever he goes. So he does that. But also the other thing, he creates excitement about Kenya Kwanza in Mombasa. For once, there is reason, because Hassan Omar is not as a charismatic and populist candidate as Mike Sonko is. Mike Sonko is a lot more of a populist. He creates a lot more excitement around himself. And I'm looking forward to the rally that Kenya Kwanza has in Mombasa. I think sometime this week. That will be an exciting rally because Sonko is going to speak at that rally. And you will see the net effect that it has. That whole emotional thing that we were talking about and the ability to connect to people emotionally, Mike Sonko knows how to do that. He knows how to spew venom out of his mouth. He knows how to excite a crowd. And that's exactly what he's being brought out for. On the last stretch, you need some of those people on your side. And they have brought Mike Sonko onto their side.
Ruth,
and he's also going to come to Nairobi. Just for you, on the last rally that Kenya Kwanza have at Nyayo Stadium, Mike Sonko will be in Nairobi, will be campaigning in Nairobi. And Mike Sonko campaigning in Nairobi, anyone needs to be wary about that he has the ability. Good thing for Azimio that it's last minute. If he had a lot more time, he would have done a lot more time.
It would have been devastating for Azimio if Mike Sonko.
Very quick one. Don't underestimate Raila's higher when he goes to, when he goes to, after Sonko has spoken in Mombasa, when Raila just goes and says higher, Because also remember that Raila Odinga has had quite a, a significant grip of Mombasa. So this could end up being not necessarily a Mike Sonko versus Abdul Samad campaign, but mostly a Mike Sonko versus Raila Odinga campaign, where Raila just goes back and says, look, you people have been my people, this is it, we have always wanted to go to State House, and this is the time. Without your vote, we can't make it to State House. And you see, at the end of the day, when they go there, they go with the six-piece narrative. Like, when you piga suti, And no offense to the voters in Mombasa, but certain regions of the country are less advanced in terms of their thinking politically, as opposed to other regions in the country. Like a Nairobi voter would sit down and probably say that, look, for governor, I am voting for this different political party. For my MCA, I'm giving an independent candidate. For a Nairobi voter is likely to think like that. A Mombasa voter...
Likely and doing are two different things. The Nairobi voters, the voters for Sonko. Yeah. So please.
I think that would be unfair.
Yeah, that's
people of Mombasa have a track record of making better decisions.
The kind of, what I'm trying to say is, look, the kind of Nairobi voter is the voter who in 2017 voted for a Jubilee governor, a Jubilee senator, a Jubilee governor, and an ODM woman representative, you know. So they can diversely think. They can say that, look, I don't necessarily have to vote 6-piece. But Mombasa looks more of like a 6-piece region. You know, it sounds to me more like a 6-piece region where if Raila just goes back and says, look, you people, this is the time we have always wanted. Please, just hear me out.
Before Ruth gets into so much hot water with the Mombasa people.
Smart is not convinced. Certainly not convinced with that argument.
I mean, to be fair to her, in Kilifi, they voted all seats ODM.
ODM, yes. That's exactly what I'm trying to talk about.
Okay.
So what I'm trying to say is that for a Mombasa voter, if Raila goes back and says, look, and this is an argument that makes quite some sense, that it could end up, like you see how we had said, for William Ruto, this is a campaign of him versus the president. So Mombasa could end up being Sonko versus Raila. And in terms of influence, Raila has more influence than Sonko.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Ruth Mbogo, Team India, you've all done very well. Thank you very much for coming. Thank you very much for your good analysis. And, of course, we'll see you again and again during this week. My name is James Smart. We do take a short break right now, together with...
All right, and I'm Zainab Ismail. This is Decision 2022, and the coverage will continue till the very end of the day. We will be covering extensively and comprehensively everything to do with the election, like we said, until the dust settles. You have to stay tuned to NTV. The hashtag, as always, is Decision 2022. Have yourself a lovely good morning. Winnie Lubembe will be coming right up in your world very shortly. Stay with us.